Hey there, welcome back to Creepy Encounters. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the videos. Fishermen or deep-sea divers of Reddit, what is the creepiest thing you've seen while in the ocean? Whenever on sea, I always felt the silence was the worst, but I have seen a great white's fin while on a fishing boat in Australia. Honestly, probably is one of the scariest thing in my life I've ever seen in my life. Meanwhile, the fisherman I was there with acted completely relaxed. Not a deep sea dive, but I was diving and watching this enormous jellyfish effortlessly swimming along when a huge sea turtle came from behind and over me and ate the jelly's body in almost one gulp. Never even saw him until the open mouth devoured the jelly. The sea is brutal. Went scuba diving in Mexico once. Was following our instructor when all of a sudden, I peer out into the distance and see these glowing silver eyes. Fucking barracuda. I was horrified. The thing just stared back at me hovering in the water. Edit, horrified, not mortified. Whoops. Watching a submarine go by underneath. It's absolutely eerie seeing something that massive making no sound or other disturbances. You wouldn't even know it was there if you weren't looking. I was salmon fishing in Alaska. The boat was maybe 14 feet from shore and I took a look at the depth finder and the water was over 1,000 feet deep. I found that kind of unnerving. Seeing my mother reach down into the water and pick up a conus textile without knowing what it was. It's this snail that shoots a neurotoxic dart to kill fish, and occasionally, people who pick it up. The snail didn't like being picked up. I saw it stick its tentacle out of the shell and start waving it around feeling for a target. Fortunately, even at 14 I knew my natural history and screamed at her to throw it away, which she did. My dad pulled the pilot out of an F-14 that he rode down into the ocean off Coronado, after ejecting his backseater. Evidently when they went to grab him his hand degloved and it was generally gross as fuck. Surf casting at night. You have to crawl, swim out into the surf in pitch black. There really isn't anything to hurt you but the dark, the water, and your imagination make you absolutely convinced that the seaweed that brushed against you is some monster hunting you. I dive, but I don't night dive. My father did, though, and he came back with this story. I've shared it before on Reddit, so you might have heard of it. He was swimming in the darkness and he was dimly aware of someone next to him. Not exactly unusual. There were several people in the water, but he was concerned about why their light might be off. Without that light, there's nothing to see. It's just an empty void. Before he could shine his light on this person, he became aware of the fact that his dive partner was on his other side. So either whoever was next to him was separated from their dive buddy, or it wasn't a person at all. The need to know caused him to shine his light, tentatively, at the shape, revealing a massive barracuda, keeping pace with him. Rightfully surprised, he moved back a bit, but the creature just kept near him. Dredging up some boldness, he moved towards it, and it moved away from him, always keeping a comfortable distance between them. After a moment, my father continued on, trying to put the thought of the predator out of his mind as it continued to shadow him. It didn't take long for the beam of his flashlight to illuminate a fish, and then, in an explosion of speed and bubbles, the barracuda shot out of the darkness and intercepted the fish, retreating back into the inky waters, only to return to my father's side a few heartbeats later. This kept up, for as long as the dive did. The barracuda stayed close, using my father's light for hunting. When at last the time came to return to the boat, the barracuda remained by his side until they reached the craft, then spun in the darkness and dove away. Spearfishing/snorkeling. I'm in the Atlantic. Depth is about 30 to 50 feet with a lot of pocket reefs around. I swim away from a reef to see what is in that direction. Visibility is about 40 feet. In front of me, at the surface, right at the edge of visibility, I see a massive body. What I can see is around 2 to 3 feet thick, and about 6 to 10 feet long. I can only see a body, I can't see a tail or head. It is a light silver with somewhat darker golden or brown stripes. It was only there for a second, it must have been turning to go the other direction and I only saw a part of its body. I had never seen anything like that. I was curious and intrigued. I started to swim towards it to see what it was. I got about 12 feet in that direction when a fright came through my body. It was a primal, undeniable feeling of absolute dread and horror. My body was telling me that whatever that thing was, I needed to get the hell out of the water as fast as I could. I stopped swimming towards it and immediately pivoted back to the boat. I swam on my back so I could keep looking behind me, in the direction that thing had been. I don't know what that thing was. But it was massive. It was a giant and I was a fly. Some part of my animal brain knew what it was. And it knew that it was a danger. Remnants of rafts that likely had Cubans on them. Great whites feeding. Not me, but my older brother. A friend of his ran a museum and was able to locate a ship that went down in Lake Michigan back in the 1800s. My brother's job was to dive down to the wreck with a few others, wait outside the hull while they went inside, then wait for them to punch a hole through the rotted wooden hull and hand him bags filled with whatever they could find. He said the creepiest part was after they punched a hole to hand out the bags, sometimes a shoe would go floating by from one of the people that went down with the wreck and lost their lives. He said he felt like he was disturbing someone's grave, even though they had permission to visit the wreck and recover what they could for the museum. Seeing the sunken fishing boats coming back for salvage and rebranding, knowing that blokes died on them. Seeing said boat with a new name, new crew out fishing months later, knowing the same fault in the design still exists. Got out of that industry years ago, thank God. Not me, but an acquaintance who used to be an industrial diver. There was a ferry accident in the Philippines, and it turned out that the Del Monte company was illegally using the ferry to ship massive barrels of a banned pesticide to some of their plantations there. Thus, it had the potential to be a toxic disaster with those barrels of poison trapped in there, and they could not recover the bodies of the dead until the pesticides were removed. My friend's company in the US was hired to retrieve the barrels with the corpses still underwater in the ferry. By this point, the bodies had floated to the top of the upside-down hull, and their hair was hanging down, swaying in the currents. The divers did successfully remove the hazard, after which the bodies could finally be removed. However, the event caused my friend so much trauma that he left that field altogether and now works on land. Can you just imagine? Went spear fishing in Laguna Beach in 2008. The beach was absolutely empty on a perfect day, which never happens. We head out a few hundred yards and swim around, but cannot see anything. The visibility was dogshit. Maybe 5-8 feet. Then a ranger appears on the beach, starts yelling at us from shore, waving us in. I had no fishing license at the time, so my buddy swims in to see what he needs. As soon as my buddy talks to the ranger, he starts yelling and waving. So I head in and start getting scared. Apparently the beach was closed because there were several great white spotted hunting sea lions at that beach earlier that day. In water that murky, whites will absolutely mistake you for food. I was terrified to the core and 10 years later have not been to the beach since. Not the ocean. But my buddy saw a body floating down the Mississippi when he was fishing. And no, you don't eat fish from the Mississippi. The winter would be the time I was fishing for rock cod in fairly shallow water, on our 18 Boston Whaler, small fishing boat. About 20 under me, clear as day, a massive great white shark slowly swam by. I couldn't really be sure, but the thing looked roughly the same length as the boat. I was already just hanging off the bow, jigging, and it just suddenly occurred to me, fuck, if I fell in right now I could just die immediately. And yes, I know great whites don't usually just go around eating people, but they still can and occasionally do. Another scary time, orcas breaching just 20 away from me. I don't care how peaceful they are, that will scare the fuck out of you when something the size of a box truck and a mouth as big as your whole body pops up right next to you from nowhere. I was probably a contender. I used to teach rescue diving. Part of doing that was taking turns teaching the fun stuff and taking turns being dead guy floating around near the bottom. I scared so many random people who would grab me and frantically paw at me to see if I was alive. I would even have a 8x10 slate next to me that said, "Not dead." Teaching a class, they never read it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe for more real life creepy encounters around the world. See you in the next video. Bye.